Hey there guys, it's AdamantLIfe. Welcome to episode 8 of Big Picture Python, the Python tutorial series where we start out with the big picture and then fill things in as we go along. So I promised we'd be getting back to our actual program this episode, so we'll go ahead and do that. And this is going to be another big picture episode, so basically what I want to start out doing is talking about where we're at and what we're looking to do. So those methods that we created last episode, over the course of the last two episodes at any rate, they allowed us to load and save data. So it seems to me that the first thing we should do with this class is create a screen to load and save the data. So that's kind of the big picture we're working at off of. And I think for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a character editor kind of thing. And we're going to just work with that for now, since that will be the simplest GUI to create. So, there are a ton of GUIs out there. Python doesn't have the largest selection. Python 3, anyway. If you go to Python 2, you can pick up a couple more. But for right now, for most of our uses as casual users, the one that comes supplied with Python is actually more than enough. And the one that comes supplied is tkinter. Import tkinter as tk. So I'll be referring to it as tk for short. And this is a bit of an older one, but like I said, for most uses, it will be absolutely fine. So what I'm going to do to start us out here is I'm actually going to take our program and change it to be a TK frame. So in most GUI languages, there is a frame or a canvas-like widget that most other widgets are built on top of. And it's just basically a box that goes on the screen. It may be transparent, it may not be. It depends on how the GUI language is set up. So with TK, we have the TK frame. This is actually going to go inside a TK window, a TK top level, but this is the kind of base unit that we're going to work off of. And you'll see as we get further into this why I make this a TK frame. A lot of people, when they first start out programming GUI, actually just leave this as is and then use this class to place stuff inside of another frame. But that's kind of a poor way to go about it. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say login frame. So we are now going to have a frame, a login frame, and we're going to start populating this. So the first thing to know about TK is that TK widgets have a master, and then they have a bunch of keyword options. This is one of those situations where I'll use the double star keyword just because there's way too many to enumerate, and we're subclassing. So super init, per usual, master, keywords. We're going to start out really basic with this login frame and then fill it out as we go along. So in the most basic sense, what we kind of want is we want a label that's going to be telling our user, select your character. Then we need something to hold all the characters in. And then we need a couple buttons to select the character. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that really quick, just so that we have a reference to work off of. So we're going to have our TK frame. Then we're going to have a label. And this label may not have a border. I'm just going to draw the border for right now. And this is going to say, choose a character. And we'll shrink this down. Alright, cool. And then we will have a list of some kind. And this will contain characters. And I'll just throw this in brackets so that we know that that's not exactly what it says. That's just a representation. And then we're going to have some buttons down here. And I think it makes sense to have a load button and a quit button. So there we go. This is the big picture we're going to be working off of right now. So let's start putting that into our code. So we've already created the top frame that we were looking for. Next, we will go ahead and make the label. So that will just be very simply tk.label. And its master is going to be our frame right here. So self. And then text equals choose a character. And then next thing we need to know about with TK widgets is that they don't show up on the screen unless you use a geometry manager to include them on the screen. Each frame, each container unit can only have one geometry unit, one geometry manager in its children. So if I pack this here, the next thing I put in here cannot have grid or place, which are the other two geometry managers. So I'm just going to be packing all of this. Everything in here is going to get packed. So that's our label. Simple and done. Took all 2 seconds to make. The next thing is going to be our list. And I'm going to go ahead and name that something so that we can refer to it later because we're going to need to. And we'll just name it character list. So it's going to be tk.listbox self, and we're actually going to just leave it right there. Now you'll recall either last episode or the episode before I said there are some methods that return none. That's what pack is. Pack is one of those methods. So what happens here is this resolves this, creates the widget, and then returns a reference to that widget. And then on that reference to the widget, we're calling pack, which then returns none. So this line right here resolves to none, which means that if I were to do this right here, instead of referring to the widget instance right here, I would actually be referring to what this resolves to as, which is none. So what I've got to do is I've got to put this down on the next line, self.characterList.pack. And now our character list refers to this instance here, and .pack refers to none. So all that's left now is our buttons. I'm going to hop back over here, and so far we're packing right, and everything's getting packed right on top of each other, which means that if we do the buttons, these buttons are actually going to get packed one on top of the other. So what we can do instead is we can create another frame here, and then we can pack the buttons next to each other inside this frame. So this frame will get packed on top of everything else, just like everything else was getting packed. So this will be packed here, on top of this one, on top of this one. But then inside this frame, we can start packing things left to right. Now you can pack things, left, right, top, bottom, but at times that's going to end up looking weird, and it's definitely not going to give us the layout that we're looking for right here. So this is the way we're going to do it. We're just going to create another frame to hold our buttons, and then pack that on this stack here, and then stack the buttons left to right in here, inside that frame. So bf button frame equals tk.frame self bf.pack. So we'll just go ahead and pack that right off the bat. And then tk.button. Actually, you know what? Let's import another module because the base tk module isn't very pretty for the buttons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import tkinter.tdk, which are themed tk or themed tkinter widgets as tdk. And then we'll go ahead and use those for our buttons because they look a little nicer. So ttk.button self text equals load tdk button. Actually, that's supposed to be bf. Good catch. Bf text equals quit. And both of these get packed. And you'll see I didn't send any arguments here. If you don't send any arguments here, then this is just pack top. The default orientation is top. So we want to pack these left to right, so we'll do side equals left here. So dot pack side equals left. And now we are almost good to go. We have this frame. Now we just got to get this frame inside a window. So we're going to come down here. This is no longer applicable, so I'll delete it. And I said we'd do it inside of a TK window. So root is generally the name I see a lot of people assign to that. Equals tk.tk. Root being the root window, the one that we create right off the bat. So this TK right here is a very special window that contains the main loop, which is kind of the process that continuously checks and updates everything inside of it for actions and changes to it. So there has to be a TK first, and then if we create any more windows, those are going to be simply top levels. So then we need to make our login frame. So I'll just say base equals login frame, and its master is going to be the root. So we'll pack it right onto the root. Base.pack. And then I said that the TK had the main loop that continually iterated over and checked for information and stuff. So we will go ahead and fire that up. Now, important thing to note about this main loop, because this is a loop, it has code that it runs through constantly. It will keep the attention of our program until it ends, which means that if we put anything down here, then anything here won't run until the window gets destroyed and exits the main loop. So putting stuff down here isn't going to do you any good unless it's stuff to clean up after you're done with your program. So at this point we can run it and see what happens. Alright, and here we are. This is our program we've made. Doesn't look like much though, now does it? So we've got choose a character. We've got our list box like we wanted. And we got load and quit. So we have everything we wanted to, but we can see that absolutely nothing is happening here. So now we're going to start filling in this bigger picture. So we'll close out of that. Close. And you'll see in the shell that this line didn't pop up until after I closed. That's because it was still running the program on this line. And then finally when I closed the program on the shell, it finished and created a new line. So coming back here, things we got to start filling in. May as well start at the top. So the most important thing is getting information into this list box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new method for this. So define pop, and I'm going to use that short for populate, character list, and I'm going to say self, and then dir, that's going to be short for directory, is going to be equal to none. Or actually, I'm just going to go ahead and use the quotes there. So what we're going to do now is we need to basically, the way I'm thinking about this, there's lots of ways you can do this, obviously. There's lots of ways you can program a lot of stuff. But the way I'm thinking about it is we're going to start out in a directory, and then we're going to look through that directory for XML and JSON files, since those are the two types of files that we had set up a parsing for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import OS. And OS has a function called list directory for file in os.listdir dir. Actually, I'll just change this to dot, since listdir said it takes dot there. So this is going to give us a string name for each of the objects in the directory. Now that's going to include directories. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check each file. So if file.rsplit, rsplit is a string method that starts from the back and starts splitting things. And the reason that changes is because if I do max split, so the maximum number of times that we're going to be splitting equals 1, then I know that I'm going to get a 2-part tuple at most. And then I'm going to call -1, and that's our index notation. So we've got a 2-part tuple at most, and then -1 is going to give us the very last item in the tuple. And I'm actually going to go ahead and assign this as file extension equals that. That way I don't have to keep on rewriting that phrase. So if file extension equals XML, then we're going to go ahead and make a character list equals list. And then we'll just do character list dot append file. So if it's an XML file, we're going to append that file to character list. elif file ext equals JSON. Actually, you know what? Let's just say if file extension in XML JSON. That's all we really need at this point, so I'm not going to bother going any further with if-else loops. And then down here, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to say CL equals self.character list. So what I'm doing is I'm taking this reference to the character list widget and making another reference. And this way, this is just going to save me a lot of typing. So from now on, we can refer to this reference to our list box widget with just simply CL. And I'll do CL.delete 0, end. So delete is a widget method that's going to delete between the 0 index item, and this end is going to get translated into whatever the last index is for the list box. So that will clear out our widget. And then for file in character list, cl.insert works just like a regular list, this list box, so we'll insert. And then it has a special end that it can take, so the very last index. And we're inserting at the end file, because file is a string from the os.list directory, as I mentioned. So we can just insert that string into the list box. And then I'm just going to put a return in here for the heck of it. There's no sense in doing the return there, but I'm going to put it in there in case we want to fill it out later. If for some reason some other method wants to go ahead and get that list off of us or something, then we can fill that in. And then up here we'll do pop character list. Self dot. So let's go ahead and run that. Alright, and as you can see, we have jimmy.json and jimmy.xml. So what the os.list directory did was it started with the local directory and used that since we didn't supply it with anything. So those are the ones in the local directory. So the next thing that we probably want to do is get this character loaded. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to close this out. And we're going to go ahead and make our define. Actually, I'll put that down a little bit lower. And nah, we'll put that here. Keep it alphabetical order. Load character. Self. And what we'll do is we're going to do selection equals self.character list dot cur selection. So important things to note. List boxes have an option to be multiple select. And therefore cur selection, which gets you the currently selected objects, is going to always be a tuple or a list. So what that means is we've got to take this selection and we've got to get only the first item out of it. So first, if we just try to do a selection 0, all right, if this list is empty because we haven't selected anything in the list box, this is going to fail and give us an error. So we will very simply just, if not selection, so if the selection is empty, we'll just return right now to avoid that error. Otherwise, selection equals selection 0 works just fine. So now we have our selected file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to teach you try and accept clauses. So what we're going to do is we're going to first figure out whether this is an XML or a JSON. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just copy this up here like this. And if file extension equals XML, then we're going to load XML character. Else, or elif I'll just do for now, file extension equals JSON, load JSON character, and else we're just going to return. We're just going to pretend that never happened, because for some reason we got a character with a poor character extension. Somehow. We've got to figure out in the code, later on, if that somehow manages to happen, we get an item in our list box that is not a JSON or XML, we're going to have to raise a flag there and say, how in the world did that happen? So, what are we doing with these load XML things? What we'll do is we'll just make character equals none, and then we can just assign character here. There we go. So, the reason this is a try and accept we're doing is because this may fail. If this is not a properly formatted XML or a JSON character, then we may get a failure trying to load this. So, in that case, in this specific case, we're probably just going to return for now. We can fill this out later. I'll go ahead and do to do tell user that it failed. And we'll cover that in another class because there's a couple different ways we can do that. So we'll talk about that. So this except, if we raise an error or an exception, in other words, then the exception will get caught right here instead of breaking the program. Now we can specify what kind of exceptions we want to catch on this line, and we can have multiple lines, except. So we could say except file not found error here, except special error right here. We can do that and handle each case by case, but for now we will just be catching all the exceptions. And in fact, I will go ahead and do one further. We're going to catch exception as E. We're going to include this for right now. So we'll catch the exception and then refer to it as E. And I'm going to leave that in there in case we want to debug later. That way we can get the exception as E and print it out, or we can always use the traceback module, which when we get to that point, when we start talking about testing our program and catching exceptions and figuring out how to deal with them, I'll go over this traceback program and stuff like that. So there are two more things that you can do with a try and accept. There is an else and a finally. We will not be using finally this time, but finally basically means whether you tried and succeeded or failed, at the very end, regardless of whether you succeeded or failed, do this stuff. We're not going to bother with that one right here, and we actually won't bother with else. So else is if you did the stuff in here without raising an error, then do this stuff before you do anything else. That's what else does here. But because we're already returning right here and right here, we actually don't need that else, because all our other exceptions, whether it was a poorly formatted string or we raised an exception trying to load the character, we were already returning off of those. This is arguably poor to simply return here, simply because we have to figure out where exactly we're returning in our code if we ever returned early and we didn't know why. But it works perfect. At this point, the program is small enough scope that we're just trying to get this program to be a reality, and therefore we don't want to have to spend time, getting all these lined up perfectly correctly. But otherwise, at this point, we have a character dictionary from our load JSON character or load XML character. So what we're going to do is we're going to say self.character equals deserialize character. And we will just leave it there for today. There's a lot of stuff that we could do off this point, include going to a different screen to do our character editing. But at this point, I'm just going to do that and then print load successful to the shell. That way, we'll be able to see that we successfully loaded a character. So we're going to go ahead and pick the XML character because I like XML better. I click the button and nothing's happening. Well, why is nothing happening is the important question. And the reason for that is because we never did anything to get to load character. So in order to get to load character, we're going to do command equals self.load character. Now, this is extremely important to note that there are no parentheses on this function right here. Command for buttons takes a function reference. It does not take an executed function. Remember that if I put this in here, then while Python is running this code and setting up our button here, as it's creating this button, it's going to say, okay, the command is equal to whatever this evaluates to at this moment. So this will actually run load character right away, and they say, okay, command is equal to none, because we're returning none down here. So that is the reason why we're not doing the parentheses here, because we want this command to run when the button gets clicked. Alright, so we made our first error of the episode, and that is I just copied file up here. We don't know what file is. We only have selection as our variables, selection and character as our variables in this function so far. So file is going to be self.characterList.get selection. So selection right here is an index number. The whole entire selection list, the current selection list, are index numbers, and then you got to go into the character list and grab the index, and then a file will be equal to that. All right, and really quick, load XML character file down here as well. I was kind of rushing through this section because I was trying to tell you about try and accept, so I left some of the code incomplete. My apologies. All right, so here we go. Grab the XML, load successful. Excellent. So we have successfully loaded a character. Looking at our code, the next thing we got to do is quit. We got to add a quit command. So what we'll do is we'll do command equals, and there's further down the line we're not going to want to do this, but for right now it's going to be okay. We'll do master.destroy. So what this is going to do is when this command gets called, it will refer to root, which is what our master is, and then call the destroy function on the master, which will destroy our main window. That is perfectly alright for our system right now, but as it gets further along, we may have to either pass another function in here, a destroy command equals master.destroy, for example. That way our default is to destroy the master. Actually, let's just set it right now for that. So our command is going to be destroy command, and if later we need to change this to something else, to some other command to exit the program, we can always do that. And per usual, master didn't have a reference in this line, so I'm just going to come down here. You've seen me do this a couple times. If not destroy equals master.destroy. Destroy CMD. Alright, so here we go. quit, and we can see the program exited. So, at this point, we have a perfectly functioning program. It will load a character, and then we can start doing things with that afterwards. Next episode, I think we'll continue in next episode. I think that's enough for today. I think you've gotten a lot of information out of that, and you can start playing around with that yourselves. Next episode, I think we're going to go ahead and start ironing this out a little bit and setting up the infrastructure for it. And then we'll go ahead and create our second screen. And that should give us plenty to work on. So, thank you for watching. Like, favorite, subscribe, and comment. And until next time, have a wonderful day, evening, or afternoon, wherever you're at in the world. I'll catch you later.